And now to Brandis and details into renewed talks between the U.S. and Mexico. Brandis.
Paris, the United States and Mexico recently relaunched high-level economic talks and partnership aiming to address infrastructure, trade, and migration in both countries. These talks originally started in 2013, but were put to a halt under former President Donald Trump. Here's Vice President Kamala Harris on resuming these talks.
Following this dialogue, I am confident that our nations will continue to work together, that our companies will continue to create jobs together, and that our people will enjoy greater prosperity and a greater quality of life.
And joining us now with more is Ester Trujillo, professor of Latin American and Latino studies at DePaul University. Esther, thank you for joining us. So first, what is your reaction? What do you think of the U.S. and Mexico restarting what's called the high-level economic dialogue? Why is this important?
Thank you for having me, Brandis. This is a really important question. My initial reaction is a mixed bag of emotions. It's always good for the U.S. and Mexico to have economic discussions. The last 4 years, we haven't really seen the level of diplomacy that's needed for these very important dynamics that affect so many aspects of the lives of folks in the U.S. and in Mexico, and frankly, outside of those two nations as well.
So Mexico has been, the U.S.'s largest trading partner in goods since 2019, especially in agricultural exports. What do you think were some of the effects when this dialogue, this back and forth, was stopped under former President Trump?
Trade partners is a really neutral way of explaining away the power that the United States has over the economies of other nations south of our border. Prior to even the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, there was a huge amount of agricultural products flowing from the United States into Mexico. U.S. agribusiness takes advantage of some very necessary agricultural subsidies. And so they're able to produce at a much smaller margin, right? They're at a much smaller cost. And so with the advent of policies like the North American Free Trade Agreement, which reduces and removes a lot of import and export taxes, it's much easier for US produced goods, which are priced lower, to be sold in Mexico for low prices. And so when the Trump administration entered into the presidency, there was some conflict over comments that he made regarding Mexico and their folks that they send. And so as you may recall, there was a moment there where Mexico kind of pulled back and said, okay, now let's see what happens when we don't accept your agricultural goods. Agribusiness kind of panicked and wanted the reestablishment of diplomacy with Mexico. And that has been a fraught issue over the last 4 years. So to see the Biden administration take a turn, into diplomacy again is a little calming, but also raises other red flags that we should be paying close attention to.
What kind of investments do you think are needed in Mexico and in Central America in order to really address, job creation, especially the reduction of poverty and inequality?
Well, the announcement from the White House includes language in it that states that there should be sustainable development that doesn't just focus on corporations, which is a departure from the announcement that was made under Obama. The Biden administration statement clearly states that they want to invest in middle-sized and small entrepreneurs in Mexico. It also states that they want to tie the development of jobs in Central America to environmental issues that are related to climate change. The statement says that they want to support this type of job creation in southern Mexico and throughout Central America in rural areas.
Do you think that this development plan will address, the large migration that's happening in the border? We've seen what's happening right now in Ciudad Acuña with a large number of migrants who are there. Or do you think the migration issue is something separate from these economic talks?
immigration can never be divorced completely from economic policies. They come hand in hand. An important thing to think about when it comes to migration and economic policy is that a lot of the folks who have left their countries in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and now also in Haiti and Cuba and other nations as they wait to cross into the US and as they wait in Mexico to see what the status of their asylum case is. These folks generally are indigenous, generally are also Afro descendants. And so this development strategy in rural areas is targeted specifically toward those migrants who've left. I'm left to wonder what will happen with development in urban areas. How will these economic conversations be also not just about folks in rural areas, but also in the urban centers?
And we've got about 30, 45 seconds left, Esther. But as this dialogue between the two countries continues, where would you like to see both administrations focusing their efforts?
There are so many things that could be said about how we can improve trade conversations. These so-called high-level economic discussions should also really be low level, right? Let's think about the everyday person. Let's think about the human dignity that is involved in economic policy. A lot of economists like to talk about trade as if it were devoid of the human factor. It's essential to consider the human factor, right? People are not externalities, and I think that's really key.
Important to keep in mind. Ester Trujillo at DePaul, thank you so much for joining us.